had been dreaming of this day for as long as I could remember. The day I would marry Tom, the love of my life. The day I would make the most sacred commitment to the person who had been by my side through every high and low. It felt like a storybook, and everything had been falling into place. I had always imagined that when the day finally came, it would be full of joy, excitement, and a sense of peace that only love could bring. The weather was perfect, the flowers were arranged just as I had envisioned, and the people I loved were all there to witness the moment. My wedding dress was everything I had hoped for, elegant, timeless, and perfectly fitting. The lace detail shimmered subtly in the sunlight, and I felt like a queen as I stood in front of the mirror. My heart was racing, but it wasn't from nerves. It was from sheer happiness. I had waited for this moment for so long, and now that it was finally here, it felt surreal. I couldn't wait to walk down the aisle to Tom, the man I had known since college, the man who had become my partner in every sense of the word, the man who was about to become my husband. Everything seemed to be perfect. My bridesmaids, my closest friends, were by my side, making last-minute adjustments to my dress and offering words of encouragement. My mother was there too, helping me with the final touches. She had always been a calming presence in my life. With her warm smile and soft voice, she could make even the most chaotic moments feel manageable. But today something was different. As I stood there, my mother seemed distant. She kept glancing at me with a look in her eyes that I couldn't quite place. It wasn't the usual maternal warmth I was used to. She seemed worried? No, that couldn't be it. I had to push the thought out of my mind. It was my wedding day and nothing at all could ruin it. I took a deep breath and smiled at my reflection. It was time. The church was beautifully decorated, filled with soft candles and fragrant flowers. The sound of the guests settling into their seats mixed with the gentle hum of quiet conversations. I could feel the nervous excitement in the air, but it was all drowned out by the steady rhythm of my heartbeat. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I had grown up dreaming about this day, fantasizing about how everything would unfold, and now it was happening. As I walked down the aisle on my father's arm, I felt the weight of the eyes on me. Family, friends, acquaintances, all looking at me in awe. And there at the end of the aisle stood Tom. He looked more handsome than ever in his tailored suit, his eyes fixed on me, with an expression of pure love and adoration. My heart swelled with emotion. In that moment everything seemed perfect. This was it, the culmination of years of love, laughter, and shared dreams. I reached the altar, my father giving me away with a kiss to my cheek, his voice thick with emotion as he whispered, "You're beautiful, sweetheart." His eyes were glistening, and I could tell he was trying hard to keep his composure. I squeezed his hand, grateful for everything he had done for me, but at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. My father, the strong man who had always been there for me, seemed uneasy. He wasn't the type to get emotional in front of others. But again, I shook off the thought. Today wasn't about anything other than love. The ceremony proceeded without a hitch. Tom and I exchanged our vows, promising to stand by each other through thick and thin, for better or worse. It felt like the entire room disappeared, and the only thing that mattered was the moment we were sharing. When we exchanged rings, and I became his wife, it felt like the culmination of everything we had built together. I was on cloud nine. But the moment the ceremony ended and we all moved to the reception hall, something shifted. The guests congratulated us with smiles and laughter, but beneath the surface, I could feel a subtle undercurrent of tension. My parents, especially my mother, seemed even more distant. They had been by my side throughout the wedding, helping with every little detail, but now they seemed to retreat into themselves, almost as if they were avoiding eye contact. I tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just the overwhelming nature of the day, the pressure, the crowds, the expectations. But something gnawed at me, a sensation I couldn't ignore. As the evening progressed, the speeches began. Tom's best man gave a heartfelt toast, followed by my maid of honor, Claire, who shared funny stories about our childhood and our time together. I laughed, the sound of my own joy filling the room, but the knot in my stomach was still there, tightening with every passing moment. Then, as the music shifted and the dancing began, my mother approached me. She had a concerned look on her face that sent a chill down my spine. I stopped dancing and excused myself from Tom. following her into a quiet corner of the reception hall. "Sweetheart, there's something I need to tell you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Something that's been weighing on my heart for a long time." I felt a lump form in my throat. "Mom, what's going on? You're scaring me. Is everything okay?" She paused, her eyes full of an emotion I couldn't quite read, guilt, fear, maybe a mix of both. She glanced around, making sure no one was nearby. "Listen, honey. There's something I've kept from you for a long time. Something I should have told you years ago. You're not really our biological daughter. You were adopted." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I felt like the world around me had frozen, like time had come to a standstill. My mother's face was etched with worry, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them in front of her. But all I could do was stare at her, my mind struggling to comprehend what she was saying. "What do you mean I'm adopted?" My voice sounded small, almost childlike, as if the words weren't my own. I wanted to laugh, to dismiss this as a misunderstanding, but I could see the sincerity in her eyes. "I know this is a shock," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we adopted you when you were a baby. We raised you as our own, because we love you. We didn't want you to feel different, so we kept it a secret all these years. But I think now, with you getting married, it's time you knew the truth." I felt my stomach drop. The ground seemed to shift beneath me. The perfect day, the perfect moment had just been tainted. I had always known I was loved. My parents had given me everything I could ever ask for: care, attention, affection. But the idea that I wasn't really theirs, that I was a stranger in their home, unsettled me in ways I couldn't describe. For a long moment I couldn't speak. I simply stood there, staring at my mother as if she were a stranger. It didn't make sense. All these years, I had never suspected anything. I had never even questioned it. Why would I? They had been my parents. They had loved me, raised me, and supported me. But now, everything felt like a lie. I asked her, almost desperate, "Why didn't you tell me before? Why now?" My mother looked away, the guilt written all over her face. "We didn't want you to feel different, sweetheart. We thought it was best to keep it from you, until you were old enough to understand. And now, with everything changing, your marriage, your future, it felt like it was time. We never wanted you to feel like you were anything less than ours." The room seemed to spin. My mother reached out, as if to comfort me, but I stepped back, suddenly feeling like I couldn't breathe. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it all. I needed space. I needed to be alone. Without a word, I excused myself from my mother and hurried out of the reception hall, my mind in a blur of confusion and disbelief. How was this possible? How had I not known? The day I had been waiting for my entire life had just been turned upside down. And I had no idea where to go from here. I stepped outside, the cool air hitting my face as I tried to calm my racing thoughts. The sounds of the reception were muffled behind me, and for a few moments, I stood in the quiet, trying to make sense of everything. But nothing made sense. I had been adopted. My entire life had been a lie, and I didn't know how to fix it. I stood in the cool night air, feeling it against my skin as the chill settled deep within me. The wedding reception continued behind me, muffled laughter and the clinking of glasses slipping through the closed door. But it all seemed so distant, so far removed from the chaos churning inside me. It felt like I had stepped out of reality and into some strange alternate version of my life, where nothing made sense. I couldn't breathe. My head spun with 100 conflicting thoughts, each one more jarring than the last. I was adopted. That one sentence kept echoing in my mind, as if it were the only thing that mattered. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about who I was, had been turned upside down in a matter of minutes. It wasn't the joy of my wedding day that lingered now, but the overwhelming weight of the truth my mother had just told me. I had been adopted, raised by two people who were not my biological parents. My heart felt like it was stuck in my throat. It was hard to focus on anything else. The image of my mother, her face pale, her hands shaking, kept coming back to me. I had seen her upset before, of course, but nothing like this. She was never the kind of person who would reveal something like that lightly. There was so much guilt in her voice, so much sorrow. What had I missed all these years? I needed to talk to someone. The first person I thought of was Tom. But then doubt crept in. How could I explain this to him? How could I tell him that the person I had always thought I was, his soon-to-be wife, wasn't even the person I thought I was? How could I stand in front of him and pretend like everything was normal when my entire world was unraveling? But the truth was, I had to talk to someone. I couldn't keep this to myself, not after what my mother had just revealed. I couldn't let it fester inside me. I pushed open the door and walked back into the hall, the warm air enveloping me as I returned to the celebration I had been so excited about earlier. The music, once so lively and full of energy, now felt like an oppressive backdrop to the growing tension inside me. The people who had been laughing, dancing, and congratulating us were still moving about, but I could hardly focus on any of it. I spotted Tom, his back turned to me as he talked with a few of his friends, and my heart fluttered. This was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. And here I was, a mess of emotions, completely incapable of enjoying it. He turned around just as I approached, and the look of joy on his face faltered when he saw my expression. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I swallowed hard, trying to push the tears back. I didn't want to break down in front of him, not on our wedding day. I took a deep breath and forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just a little overwhelmed, I guess." Tom studied me closely, his eyes searching mine. "You don't look fine. What happened?" The weight of my mother's words flooded back to me. I could feel my chest tighten. My thoughts were racing. And for the first time that day, I didn't know what to say. I need to talk to you," I whispered, my voice trembling. Without hesitation, Tom gently took my arm and led me away from the crowd, away from the celebrations. His expression was one of genuine concern, and for a moment, I wondered how I had gotten so lucky to have someone who cared for me this much. But then the weight of my secret pressed down on me, and the words I needed to say seemed impossible to form. We found a quiet corner, a secluded nook near the entrance to the reception hall. The soft glow of the chandeliers cast a warm light, but it felt too harsh for the vulnerability I was experiencing. I took another deep breath and turned to Tom, forcing myself to speak. "Tom, there's something I need to tell you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Something that I should have known, something that changes everything." He frowned, clearly alarmed by the tone in my voice. "What is it? What happened?" I closed my eyes, fighting the wave of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. "I found out today that I was adopted. I'm not their biological daughter, Tom. My parents aren't my real parents." The words left my mouth with a force that startled even me. It felt like they had been lodged in my throat for hours, and finally, with that confession, I had let them out. Tom stared at me for a long time, his mouth slightly open, as though he couldn't quite process what I had just said. His brow furrowed in confusion. "Wait, you're saying your parents aren't your real parents? But how is that possible?" I nodded, feeling a tear slip down my cheek. "My mother told me today, right before the reception. She said I was adopted when I was a baby, but she never told me before because she didn't want me to feel different. She said they kept it a secret for my sake, so I would feel like I belonged with them. But now I feel like I don't belong anywhere." Tom stepped closer, his hand gently cupping my cheek. "That's a lot to process," he said softly. "But it doesn't change anything between us. You know that, right?" I shook my head, my emotions still raw. "I don't know, Tom. I don't know if I can just move past this. My whole life has been a lie. I always thought I knew who I was, but now it's like I'm a stranger to myself. And I don't even know who to turn to. My whole family is out there celebrating, and I feel like I'm in a different world from them." Tom held me tighter, pulling me into an embrace. His warmth, his presence was a comfort, but it didn't make the pain go away. "I'm here for you," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "Whatever you need, I'm here. We'll figure this out together. You don't have to go through this alone." His words should have been a relief, but all I could feel was an overwhelming sense of disorientation. I had always believed in the safety of my family, in the love they gave me. And now that world felt like it was crumbling around me. "I don't know what to do," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "I need answers. I need to know what really happened. Why was I adopted? What else don't I know? And why did they wait until now to tell me?" Tom kissed the top of my head. his hand rubbing my back soothingly. You don't have to have all the answers right now. It's okay to take some time to process this. We'll figure it out together. But you don't have to carry this weight alone. Not anymore. I nodded, but the relief I hoped to feel didn't come. Instead, a new sense of determination began to take shape. I couldn't go on living with this uncertainty. I couldn't let this truth remain buried inside me any longer. There were too many unanswered questions, too many pieces of the puzzle that didn't fit. I needed to know the full story, and if my parents couldn't or wouldn't give me the answers, I would have to find them myself. I need to talk to them, I said, more to myself than to Tom. I need to know everything. I need to understand why they kept this from me for so long. Tom nodded, understanding the weight of my words. I'll go with you. We'll do it together, okay? I couldn't help but smile at him, grateful for his support. But the smile was brief, and as I pulled away from him, I felt the enormity of what I had to do. The wedding reception, the guests, the celebrations, all of it seemed like a distant memory now. The real story, the one that had been kept from me for so long, was just beginning to unfold. And I had to face it head on. The days following the revelation felt like I was living in a fog, a never-ending loop of confusion and disbelief. I had always thought of my life as a beautiful linear story, one full of love, family, and safety. But now everything felt warped. The truth that I had been adopted, and the secrecy that surrounded it, left me questioning the very foundation of my existence. I spent the next few days trying to process what my mother had told me on my wedding day, but the weight of it all was suffocating. My mind kept returning to one question that kept me up at night. Why? Why had they kept this secret from me for so long? Why hadn't they told me sooner? What was so bad about my adoption that it needed to be hidden from me until now? The uncertainty of it all gnawed at me, leaving me feeling like a stranger in my own life. The more I tried to distract myself with normal things, calling my friends, updating my social media with wedding pictures, trying to prepare for the next chapter with Tom, the more I realized that I couldn't just move on. There was something deeply unsettling about not knowing the full truth about my origins. I needed answers. I needed to know the full story. My mother had told me that they had kept it a secret to protect me, but that explanation didn't sit right with me. The truth seemed far more complicated, and I had to uncover it. That's when I made the decision. I was going to search for the answers myself. Tom, as always, was supportive. He had offered to help me figure everything out, but he also understood my need for independence. He had always respected my need to solve things on my own. I'll be here for you no matter what, he had said. But I know you need to do this yourself. His words resonated with me. This was something I had to do for myself. I had to reclaim my story, even if it meant confronting uncomfortable truths. I began by asking my parents for the adoption records, but they were evasive. At first, they claimed they didn't have them readily available. My father, who had always been a pillar of support, seemed to struggle with the idea of revisiting the past. You don't need to go down that road, he said, his voice uncharacteristically distant. You're our daughter. That's what matters. But it wasn't enough. My heart was heavy with the feeling that there was more to the story. I couldn't just accept their answers. I couldn't move forward in my life without knowing who I truly was. The adoption wasn't just a piece of paper for me. It was part of my identity. It was about understanding where I came from, who I had been before I became the person I was today. So, I turned to a private investigator. I found a well-regarded investigator named Maggie online. Someone who specialized in uncovering hidden family histories and navigating adoption records. I didn't know how to feel about reaching out to someone I didn't know, but I was desperate. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Maggie was empathetic when I first called her. I could hear the concern in her voice as I explained my situation. She understood how important it was for me to uncover my roots, to find answers to the questions that had been haunting me. I'll help you as best I can, she said, but we need to take this one step at a time. The first step was simple: obtaining my adoption records. The legal process for acquiring adoption documents varied by state, and Maggie explained that it could take some time. She encouraged me to be patient, though I was anything but. The waiting was unbearable. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, I felt like I was losing more and more of myself. I had spent my entire life with the belief that my parents were the people who had given me everything I needed. They had raised me with love, taught me right from wrong, provided everything I could have ever wanted. But now I couldn't shake the feeling that they had been hiding something dark. I kept replaying the conversation with my mother over and over in my head. The way her voice had trembled when she told me I was adopted. The way she had looked at me as if she were both apologizing and pleading for my understanding. It wasn't the fact that I was adopted that bothered me. It was the secrecy that surrounded it. The fact that I had been kept in the dark for so long. And why hadn't she told me before? Was there something even more sinister that she hadn't yet revealed? I couldn't let it go. Finally, after weeks of waiting, Maggie called me with the news I had been both dreading and hoping for. The adoption records had come through, and there were several details that I needed to see. My stomach turned as I scheduled a meeting with her, knowing that the answers I sought were only one conversation away. When I arrived at Maggie's office, she was waiting for me with a thick manila folder on her desk. She greeted me with a kind smile, but I could tell that she was just as eager to see what was inside the folder as I was. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. I nodded, though I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to uncover something that would change my life forever. Maggie opened the folder, and the first thing I saw was a copy of the adoption paperwork. It was a standard form, nothing particularly unusual. But then I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. The name of my biological mother. It was a name I didn't recognize. No surprises there. But what really caught my attention was the next line. My biological mother had been listed as a ward of the state. The papers provided only vague details about her background, and there were no indications of who her family members were, or why she had been in state care. I had so many questions, but I didn't even know where to begin. I stared at the paper in disbelief, trying to comprehend what it meant. How had my biological mother ended up in state custody? What had her life been like? And more importantly, why had I never been told anything about her? Maggie continued to sift through the papers, flipping past medical records and legal documents, but I could hardly focus on anything else. The details about my biological father were even more cryptic. He was listed as unknown, with no further information provided. "Do you know anything about your biological mother's background?" Maggie asked, her tone gentle but probing. I shook my head, my mind reeling. No, I had no idea she had been a ward of the state. My parents never mentioned anything like that. All I knew was that I was adopted, but they never gave me any details. Maggie's expression grew more serious. "This is strange. It's very uncommon for adoption records to be so vague. There's usually more information about the birth parents, even if they're not involved. But this seems incomplete." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. There was something about the way Maggie spoke that made me think there was more going on here than I could understand. She was clearly concerned, and I was beginning to feel the same way. I had always assumed that the mystery of my adoption was a simple matter. My parents had adopted me when I was a baby, and that was that. But now the gaps in the records, the lack of information, felt like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't put together. Maggie must have seen the fear in my eyes, because she gently placed a hand on mine. "I know this is hard," she said, "but we'll keep digging. I'll see what else I can uncover about your birth mother and father. There may be more records we haven't found yet. It's a long process, but we'll get to the bottom of it." I nodded, but my heart felt heavy. The questions swirling in my mind had only multiplied. Why was my adoption so shrouded in mystery? Why were the records so sparse, so incomplete? And most importantly, what happened to my biological mother? I had entered this journey expecting to find answers, but what I was discovering only raised more questions. With every new revelation, I was beginning to realize just how little I knew about my own life. But there was no turning back now. I had to keep going. I had to find the truth, no matter how dark or uncomfortable it might be. As I left Maggie's office, the weight of the truth hung over me. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I knew one thing for sure. My search for the truth had only just begun. The days after my meeting with Maggie were the longest I had ever endured. I felt like a person caught in a storm, watching as my world was torn apart by the winds of uncertainty. Every time I tried to focus on something, on the life I thought I had, on the future I was supposed to be building with Tom. My mind would inevitably circle back to the unanswered questions that continued to haunt me. Who was my biological mother? Why was she listed as a ward of the state? What had happened to her? And why was my adoption shrouded in such secrecy? I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened. Something that my parents weren't telling me. No matter how much they tried to comfort me with the idea that family is what matters, I couldn't help but feel betrayed by the lies, or worse yet, the omissions. My identity had been built on the foundation of a story that wasn't true, and I couldn't stop myself from wondering how much of my life had been shaped by this hidden past. As the days wore on, Maggie worked tirelessly on the case, tracking down leads, contacting government agencies, and digging into old records. I tried to distract myself with mundane tasks, meeting with wedding planners to reschedule some events that had been interrupted by the chaos of my emotional turmoil, talking to friends, trying to at least pretend that I wasn't spiraling. But each time I faced my reflection in the mirror, all I saw was a stranger staring back at me. It was on the fourth day after my meeting with Maggie that I finally got the call I had been waiting for. My heart raced when I saw her name on my phone's screen, my pulse quickening as I wondered what new discovery she had unearthed. Could this be the day I finally had answers? Hello? I said, my voice almost shaking. Maggie, she replied, I've found something. I gripped the phone tighter, my breath hitching in my chest. What? What did you find? I found your birth mother, she said, and there was a pause. But it's not exactly what you were expecting. My means spoon. What do you mean? What did you find? Well, she began, your birth mother. Her name is Elizabeth Calloway. She passed away several years ago. But that's not the most surprising part. The records I found, they suggest she was involved in some pretty dark stuff. It looks like she had a history of mental health issues, and there are police reports here that suggest she was involved in some illegal activities. I felt a cold wave wash over me. What kind of illegal activities? I asked, barely able to form the words. Drug abuse, theft and assault, Maggie replied, her voice careful. It's not a pretty picture. And to make matters worse, I've found records that indicate she was not in a stable environment when she gave birth to you. It looks like you were taken from her shortly after birth. I felt the blood drain from my face. I was speechless, unable to process the gravity of what Maggie was telling me. My biological mother had been involved in illegal activities? She had been unstable, unable to care for me, and I had been taken away from her just after I was born? I hadn't expected this. I had hoped for something, anything that would allow me to make sense of my past, but this was more than I could handle. There's more, Maggie continued, her voice hesitant now. I found out that Elizabeth had a history of being in and out of psychiatric institutions. It seems like she struggled with deep mental health issues for most of her adult life. And the information I've uncovered suggests that you may have been taken into state custody as a result of those issues. You were placed for adoption because she was deemed unfit to raise you. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. The woman who was supposed to be my mother had been deeply troubled, and I had been taken from her because she couldn't care for me. It wasn't just a simple adoption story, it was a tragedy. I wasn't the child of a loving mother who had made the difficult decision to place me for adoption. No, my birth mother had been in the grips of something much darker, something I couldn't have possibly imagined. What happened to her? Why didn't anyone tell me about this? I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Maggie's voice softened. Elizabeth died in a psychiatric facility. She never regained custody of you. The state made the decision to place you for adoption when they determined she was unable to provide a stable environment. As for why your parents never told you, it seems like they were trying to protect you from this. They likely thought that keeping the truth from you would allow you to have a normal life, without the weight of your biological mother's past hanging over you. I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't sure if I should feel relieved, angry, or sad. The truth was, I felt all of those things at once. I had been living a lie, but now that the truth had come out, I didn't know how to deal with it. Thank you, Maggie, I said, my voice trembling. I don't know if I can handle all of this right now, but I need to process it. Thank you for finding the truth. Take your time, she replied gently. If you need anything else, don't hesitate to reach out. I ended the call and sat there in silence for what felt like hours. My entire body felt numb, and I couldn't bring myself to move. The weight of what I had just learned was too much to bear. My birth mother, someone I had never known, had been caught in a web of addiction, mental illness, and crime. She had died in an institution, and I had been taken from her at the earliest possible moment. As the hours passed, I tried to process the overwhelming wave of emotions crashing over me. I had so many questions, but none of the answers were simple. I had always imagined a clean, clear-cut narrative of adoption. Parents who had adopted me because they wanted to give me a better life. But now the truth was infinitely more complex. It wasn't just a story of love and sacrifice. It was a story of trauma, instability, and heartbreak. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to accept that. Later that evening, Tom came home from work. I had been waiting for him all day, hoping that he would bring some sort of stability to my spiraling thoughts. But when he walked through the door, I didn't know what to say. He could see the look on my face, and immediately knew that something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked gently, stepping toward me. I swallowed hard, trying to hold back tears. "I found out more about my birth mother," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "She wasn't what I thought. She had been deeply troubled. She struggled with addiction, mental illness, and she was involved in criminal activities. She was unfit to raise me, and I was taken from her when I was just a baby." Tom's expression softened, and he sat down beside me, taking my hand in his. "I'm so sorry, love," he said quietly. "I can't even imagine how hard this must be for you." I nodded, my tears finally spilling over. "I don't know what to feel. I wanted to know who I really was, but now that I know, I'm not sure I'm ready to face it. I feel like I've lost so much, but at the same time, I don't know who I'm supposed to be anymore." Tom wrapped his arms around me, holding me close. "You don't have to figure everything out right away. It's okay to feel lost. What matters is that you're still you. This doesn't change who you are or who we are together. I love you for who you are, not because of where you come from." I leaned into him, letting his words wash over me. The road ahead was still unclear, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone. Tom would stand by me no matter what. The truth had come to light, but it wasn't the simple, neat resolution I had hoped for. The answers I had been searching for were far from the fairy tale I had imagined. But in the end, I realized that life isn't about having a perfect, clear story. It's about accepting the complexity of our experiences, the good and the bad, and learning how to live with both. And as I sat there in Tom's arms, I knew that the journey wasn't over. I still had questions. I still had to find peace with my past. But for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. It wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that would be shaped not just by the truth I had uncovered, but by the love and strength I had in the people around me, especially Tom. And together we would face whatever came next.